Hello, and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. What happens when creativity, sustainability, and storytelling all come together in one project? Today, we're exploring that very question as we meet an author whose journey spans culinary arts, embroidery, real estate development, and fashion. Her embroideries grace prestigious museums and magazines, and she has even co designed award winning construction projects with her husband. As a Master of Fine Arts student, she conceived her new children's book as part of her sustainable fashion design thesis. The book blends imagination, values, and creativity in a meaningful way, and what makes it even more special is that her twins, Maya and Rumi, are at the heart of the story. She currently lives in San Anselmo, California, with her husband Asaf, their twins, Maya and Rumi, and their rabbit Dot. So I'm Jenny, your host for the episode of this author roundup. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Mical Rezoni, along with her husband Asaf, to talk about the new book, Miri and Jade's New Clothes. Mical and Asaf, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to start asking you questions, but let's start off by you telling us what your book is all about.
Miri and Jade New Clothes is a story about an adventure of my children in learning how to make clothes, cotton and silk. It is about exploration of how the children decided to make clothes for the new dolls that I received from my friend Chevy, and wanted to talk about how hard it is to actually make clothes, stuff that we take for granted. And
Right.
so this is an exploration of how you can make handmade stuff from the beginning to the end product. And in the way, we find out how hard it is and how consuming it is to make those and find solution to that problem.
I see. So the book features your twins. And I know everyone or most authors would love writing a book about their kids. But what I want to know is what inspired the idea for the topic of this book. How did you come up with the concept of using dolls to explore creativity and sustainability?
So I have a very deep love to fashion. And I also have very deep love to nature and our planet. And I wanted to become a fashion designer and decided in my later years to actually embark on that new career. And so at the moment enrolled in an MFA program at Academy of Art University in San Francisco. And in my thesis, my concentration is about sustainability, because fashion is one of the worst polluters in the world. So the fashion industry is really harming the environment in many different ways, from polluting our waters by dyes, from using resources like water and energy, from using slave labors and unethical work environment and practices, which pain me because, as I said, I like fashion, like getting it, I like new things. And I wanted to find a way to combine those things, to still be able to create beautiful things without taxing the environment. So at one point, I was writing yet another academic paper about we are going to have to reduce our practices and blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking to myself, who is going to read it? And who is going to care? And who do I need to talk with? And I thought, kids, it's our future. It's their future that we are handing them now. And so I start thinking about talking to kids about this issue. And in my mind, I always kept, when I was a child, long time ago, I live in a country where the wildflowers, a certain type of wildflowers that come in the beginning of the winter, just covered, the meadows and stuff. And people would go out and pick the flowers. And because the flowers, that type of flowers, need to seed in order to multiply, the flowers had become endangered because people pick them. So the government actually came up with a program to educate kids that you can go look at them, but you don't pick them up. And the kids told their parents, hey, listen, we learned that you can't pick them up. And you know what? The flowers came back. So I thought, we have the power to educate kids and to make them understand that this is important and this is how we treat our environment. And I know that throughout their life, my kids know that. My kids at this point really mostly thrift or exchange clothes, but they very, very rarely actually buy new clothes. So I know we can teach it to children. And that's a long answer to this question.
But
Yes.
I think getting children involved in believing and the concept is the most effective engine for change that we can come up with. It is lasting. And that example that Mical gave about the revival of endangered flowers we shared that experience as children. It was extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And it really brought about significant change.
Right.
And so that would be our hope to be able to, in a very to foster a positive message that brings about real change.
When people ask me why I wrote the book, I said that I have a very small and humble goal. I want to change the world.
That's amazing. And that's what I love about your book. The fact that it caters to young minds and talks about something that's so serious and that's very important. I think you're right. We really have to start them young and we have to talk to them about these things as early as we can. So your book emphasizes the importance of reusing materials, right? So there's the last part where I don't want to spoil the entire story, but yes, it will talk about reusing materials. So what message do you hope young readers would take away about sustainability?
Well, I think that we as a society, as in a global way, really how we had forgotten how valuable cloth is. And we do not know how difficult it is to make it. And I chose two natural materials because there's a concept that if we use natural materials, the damage is not as large, which is false, really. It is extremely hard to manufacture silk and cotton, and it have very, very large and harmful consequences to our environment. So I wanted to start with silk. And I want to tell you that this whole book about Maya and Rumi and the dolls was conceived with material that are around us. It's about the family. It's about stuff we actually did. So when the kids were about 10, we did raise silkworm. And then for this book, I got silkworm. What do you call them? Silkworm. The cocoons. I got the real cocoons, and we produce silk. And
wow.
And we spun, and we did make the hat, the doll, and this indeed took as many cocoons as I describe in the book. So everything is really conceived and made with homemade materials. And I just wanted to show how hard it is to make it. Cotton is the longest growing perennial, no, it's an annual in the entire world. It takes 6 months to grow cotton, and you have to water it, and you have to, there's a lot of pesticides that go into raising it. And those are practices that I actually know firsthand because I was growing up raising cotton. And I know on a large scale, I grew up in a farm that raised cotton. So those are things that are kind of in my back pocket that I could pull up and say, hey, this is a lot harder than you think. And this, up to maybe 100 or even 50 years ago, people did not just throw out their clothes. And if they, lost the buttons or had a hole, everybody knew how to mend and how to care and value it, heirlooms and stuff like that were so important. And now we really treat it like trash. We go to fast fashion places, and I'm not going to mention names, but we all do it. And we buy something that fall apart in 2 weeks, and after 3 washes, if at all, it goes in the trash. I asked my kids the other day, do you know how to sew a button on a shirt? And Rumi said, yes, I do. And I said, how many of your classmates know how to do it? And she said, I think no one.
Yeah. That's actually very sad.
Yeah.
I mean, we somehow forget about all the work that goes into making clothes once we already have the clothes. And like you've said, it's so easy for us to just discard it when it's, let's say, it's torn or something. Or the worst is that if we don't like it, some people don't even wear it anymore. They would buy it and then they decide they don't want to wear it and then just discard it, right?
I wanted to say one sentence is that the book is a creative adventure that offers children a way to go on a similar adventure themselves that not only protects the environment, but is also creative for themselves and help them create their own identity, which I think is something that kids, especially nowadays, really struggle with. There's so much mass everything, mass media, mass production, and what makes me, right? I think a lot of children struggle with that, and this book gives one path, one avenue to define me in a creative and sustainable way, and that's what.
I want to say one more thing in the realm of the negative things that I've been thinking about, because we have talked about the damage, we've talked about poisoning the rivers, taking water from countries who can afford it. I want to remind people one thing is that when we say, oh, my clothes are handmade, all of our clothes are handmade by somebody. Clothes is not something that is done by a machine. Yes, the weaving and stuff is made by a machine, but every single shirt, every single pair of pants is done by somebody. And if we can sell it for $5 or $10 or $15, it's because it's made over somebody else's back. And those are people in third world country that are not getting paid enough. Some of them, like in certain countries, are slaves. They don't get paid at all. And so we should not forget that. However, I wanted the book to be light and positive. I do not think that we can get people to do something by hitting them over the head. I want to say, this is how we can do it better. This is my understanding. If this teaches one kid, one parent who reads it, that this is a problem, then I've done my job. So I really wanted to only put a positive spin on this and not say no, say yes, what we can do.
Earlier, Mikal, you talked about the activities that you've had with your kids, like sewing, knitting, and going as far as getting the silkworms and the cocoons and all that. So, in your book, you talk about those things. How do hands-on activities such as sewing and knitting encourage creativity and problem solving in children?
Well, I think that some of the concepts that I talked about, like making cloth, is a foreign subject. And I think if you don't know, if you don't have the hand-on experience, for example, there are illustration in the book that show how Maya holds the caterpillar, right? They're
Yeah.
cute, right? And when you grow them and you raise them and you feed them every day, for you get an emotional attachment to it.
Mhm.
And then when it's time to actually take them out of the cocoon, the way we do it in commercial world is we boil them alive. I like people to know that, right? I like people to know that that's how you do it. There are other ways to do it, which we go through. But if you don't have that tactile connection, I think you don't really understand the impact you are creating. And I think I also very strongly believe that it's great for kids to, get out, climb on trees, pick some leaves, grow animals, play with the rabbits, make things, garden, understand how the natural world happened. If a child need to go to the garden to water a plant 3 times a week, they get an understanding of how it grows, what's happened. And I think that is very important for developing mind to practice, to understand, and to be a part of.
But I think first of all, in general, I should say that children really learn in two major ways. One is playing, which includes doing stuff, and the other one is reading and being read to, and storytelling. The whole thing about story, and even the book itself has a lot of problem solving. So, without too much spoiler alert, they come to a point where they have to figure out how much of this or that they need. So there's tiny little math, problem solving that's sprinkled all around, literally sprinkled all around the book. When you start knitting, you have to start thinking about color matching and size and fit. And so there's a lot of problem solving that come, that come organically through this. And as we have already said, the book goes like, they first start very excited about, doing everything from silk, and then they encounter certain problems that might have to do with the resources, et cetera. And then they found another way to solve it. And then they found the problem with that solution. And then they found another way to solve it. And so
critical thinking and problem solving, also fine motor skills, a certain age is something that really, so there was a lot of things that I think one can learn by doing things, by creating things, creative expression, and knowing how to do that, creating patterns, looking at stuff and understand how it's made, I think is fantastic for children. So I'm a supporter of actually getting out there and doing things.
Oh, I agree. It's one thing to know about the concept of something and another to actually do it or apply it, right? And like you've said, that's the best way for our kids to learn about the concepts, to actually apply it. And I think it's very important that you were able to touch on those things in your book. Now, let's talk about the fact that the main characters in your book are your twins, and they are siblings, so they have a certain dynamic in the way they approach problems and all that. And they did see that in the story or in the book. So, what did you want to convey about teamwork and sibling relationships through their dynamics?
I think, Maya and Rumi are siblings, and, they wouldn't be normal kids if they didn't have their their strifes and sometimes disagreements. But
Mhm.
what I wanted to show is that collaboration is how we are doing things better. Like there's places in the story where we, for example, say, I don't want to kill the caterpillars. And or she say, we don't have enough material. And then they both think about how we can get more. How can we not kill the caterpillars? And they support each other by each playing to her strength. And those are actually real traits. Maya is good at math. Rumi is very practical. And I like to emphasize that collaboration is the way to go, is the way we can approach things. And it makes us stronger to work together. And I think that if we have big goals, like they have the small goals of making clothes for their dolls, we have the goals of protecting the environment, stop being a little bit of our overconsumption. We need to work together. And by working together, we gain strength, understanding, and we are just better. And I believe that at the core of things, Maya and Rumi actually approach the world like that, you know? And I wanted to put that into the book, like how important it is to collaborate.
That's a very strong message. And I love the fact that you said that. I mean, how the twins would complement each other with their different personalities and all that. And how your readers who may not be in that situation, who may not have siblings or who may not have other people helping them, just showing them how important it is to work together as a team, work with someone in a bigger goal, like you said. I think that's a very strong message.
I also think that, sometimes when you are down and you sit there and you think all that work that we've done and we don't have enough, it's hard to get out of it without somebody telling you, hey, listen, let's try another way,
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was important to me that they work together. And I actually think that Asaf and I brought our children when they had conflicts and they would come to us. We would say, go back to your room and resolve it, talk to each other. And they usually did. And I think that in our society, we often don't give kids, we don't empower them enough to do that. And I want to empower kids to do that. Kids can use needles, kids can use knives, kids can do everything from a very early age. We just think they can't, but they can.
I agree. So, Mical and Asaf, let's talk about your experience now as authors. So, you said earlier when we were talking before this interview that this is your first book, right, Mical? So, tell us about how long it took you to complete the book and take us through the journey of your experience as an author.
It took about a year and a half to complete the book. Part of it was doing, I think there are 30 illustrations in the book, and I did them all. So, and if you looked at the book, they are rather involved. So that took a while for me to do. And actually, I live in Marin County, and I go to school in San Francisco. And I stopped driving and I'm taking public transportation. In my case, I go in the ferry. And a lot of those drawings I did in the ferry, just sitting there with my bucket of pencils and illustrating. And often people kind of like are over my shoulder looking to see what she's doing. And so the writing there's not that much of it, but I wanted to make it concise, logical, and accurate. And I had to employ this guy here because I think the ideas were there and some of the language was there, but I really needed help in organizing my thoughts and turning it into the book that it is. And that wouldn't have happened. So it's actually a year and a half of both of us working on.
I see. Tell us about the fun part of, making this book.
To me, the fun part is I love drawing. Always have been an artist. I always have had my hands in something, either drawing or painting or cooking or creating real estate, and now making fashion.
Embroidery, the big one.
Or embroidering. I've actually had quite a long time career in very fine embroidery. And so to me, that's my joy, and especially making drawings. So, they're all pencil drawings. So making drawings of my most beloved treasure, my kids, was just, I love it. I love it so much. So drawing, conceiving the drawing and coming up with them being realistic so that kids can understand the process and see that actually it exists, and making the stuff, because we did make the clothes, and we did spun cotton, we did stretch silk. That was my joy, my joyous moments, and sharing it with the family too. Like, look how cute is looking this drawing, and that was a lot of fun. And then there's the magical moment when you get this, and it's like, wow, I did it, because I was thinking in the beginning it was like a school project, and then I thought, I want more people to read it, and how can we make it better, and how can we get it into the world? So it was a long, but I think joyous
I think
process.
a couple of things I wanted to add, see if I don't lose my train of thought. First of all, is the greatest example of not just of learning by doing. We talked a little bit earlier about learning by doing, but what about fun by doing? And Mical is all about the fun of doing. She's very good at it, obviously. And she's actually had she almost forgot to mention it, but she had a career in doing very fine embroidery and was on the cover of international magazines. So this is an example of a very fine embroidery that Mical did. And you can see how much detail goes into it. And this happens to, I don't know if you recognize the model, but that's Rumi.
And that actually is my memory of the story I told you before about the going out to not pick the flower, and just and in the background there's the train that actually signify the danger that we're all in if we keep on using fossil fuels and stuff like that. So it's a joy and beautiful moment with creating which depict the fragility of the world. So for many years, I was doing fine embroidery, was quite known for it by a different name. So So I did them under the name of Mical Aloni.
If people are looking for, if your audience is looking for her past work, you got to look under Aloni, Aloni.
Right.
Okay.
And I published more technical stuff, it will be under Assaf Rezoni.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So that explains it.
Yeah.
I was actually trying to look for your embroideries online, and
You couldn't find them.
of course I wasn't able to find it. And I thought, and I was thinking to myself, how come it's not online? Maybe it was a long time ago that they don't have it online yet or something. Or perhaps I can ask later on about what magazines it was on and all that. But I actually did go as far as trying to look at the embroideries. But now that you told me about it, that explains it.
It's out there. Since I haven't been doing it for the last project that I did with embroidery was the Smithsonian Craft Show, and that was in 2015. I do
Mhm.
still have a Facebook under
Mhm.
under Aloni Embroidery, and I don't have a website anymore, but you can
Mhm.
still find a lot of those magazines and articles if you just Google my name or go to my Facebook page under Aloni Embroidery. I also had a restaurant in New York for about 2 years. And so I can cook too. So everything that I always had that since I was a kid, I always felt that if you can do it with your hands, I can do it. And so I
Mhm.
always had a sense of empowerment about making things like I can cook, I can sew, I can. When the pandemic came, I felt very like I wasn't worried. I was like, I can get things, I can make it happen. I can find ways, and I wanted to bring that into the book of if you want to know how to do it, if you can imagine it, you can. So
You're so blessed to have those skills.
I think that if we really want to not use so much fast fashion items, we
Mhm.
need to go back and know how to do things, or at least have more people knowing how to mend, how to create something new from something old. Like this
Mhm.
jacket that I'm wearing, it's hard to see, but it's made out of old pairs of jeans. Let me get up and show it to you. It's made out of used pairs of jeans that I got at thrift store, and it's completely
Mhm.
lined with beautiful silk ties. So I think that if we think again that it is important to keep those things, and stuff that's torn is not ugly, it's just it can be as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than new stuff, and understand the value of cloth and
Mhm.
and the work that go into it, we'll be better off. We'll make the world a better place.
I was going to say that Mical always, I mean, we're sitting through a meeting that she finds boring, for an hour, and at the end of an hour there is an illustration, the back of a napkin made by Mical. You can see, natural to her. The other thing that I was thinking as Mical was talking about having the confidence that you can always solve a problem, and I remember that one of the things I told my kids since they're almost age 0 is that every reasonable problem has a solution.
Mhm.
You just need to have the thinking skills and the physical skills to be able to come up with a solution, but it's there.
Right. I agree. So that was the fun part or the easy part. Let's talk about the other side of the coin. I know it's not always all fun and all that, and there are parts of writing the book or publishing a book that can be quite difficult or challenging. Tell us about those parts.
So I already said that for me, some of the logical and math thing was hard, but we talked about it, and I'm blessed to have a staff here that helped me. You know what I really hate is the editing. Oy vey, that is the hardest thing. It's like
Mhm.
go over and over and you think you got it. And there's another typo and there's another new things that need to be added or taken away. To me, it's very difficult. And
Mhm.
and yeah, I rather just do the creative stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping in the future that I don't actually have I hope to do other projects, but I'm hoping that that will take him out of my plate.
So who took care of that part for you?
Oh, we did.
Tell us about that part,
And
Asaf.
I actually like editing to a degree. I like perfectionism, so we went over it over and over again, and the writing style. It was interesting because the writing style was a little bit Hemingway inspired because I wanted to, how kids talk with, and and then with a lot of ands rather than a lot of howevers and stuff. And I wanted to give it a little bit of that feeling like a kid is telling the story. And then when the publisher their editor came back and just started putting commas and however everything. We had to actually reject it.
Right.
Even if it's grammatically iffy, but the style is what we wanted.
So assessing that was a really long and exhausting process. And what we did a lot is reading it out loud to each other to see if it makes sense, if it sounds. We wanted to keep it in a somewhat childish way of talking rather than how adults talk. So that, not having sentence completely correct is something that editors don't like. And so we had to make educated decision of what sounds good and not completely grammatically correct, because again, this is a children's book. So we want to keep it light and fun for kids to feel that that's how they talk and that's what they say.
Yeah, that's another challenging aspect of writing a children's book. You have to keep them engaged. And sometimes if it becomes too complicated for some, then they would lose interest in it. So I kind of get what you're saying, that you have to keep that style to keep your readers engaged.
Right.
And I love the fact that you two make a good team. I mean, you complement each other. So Mical can take care of the creative side, and Assaf took care of the editing and making sure that, the story just runs the way it's supposed to be, and it's easy for the readers or the young kids to understand it, right? But in your book, I would just like to point out that it did talk about silk and cotton production, those processes. So how much research went into those processes, and how did you simplify them so it's easy for the younger audience to understand it?
So, we already talked about me doing my MFA and about sustainable fashion. So I actually gained a deep understanding of that issue that was driven both by my personal and my focus of my MFA thesis. But however, in order to present it to children, I decided to just concentrate on one aspect of, and that's the aspect of making cloth, because I thought that my knowledge that started since I was a kid, because I grew up growing cotton and I know a lot about agriculture and about the natural world. I thought that is a segment that we can take without getting into don't do that, yes, do that. Just taking a very small section and getting into that, and in a manner that's not preachy, or I think you can so easily, even now when our kids 17, sometimes we talk with them and you see how it's go right over their head, right? So I wanted to put something that does have the joy of learning and in something that's engaging and easy to understand.
Maybe to answer your question more directly, which actually ties into the style of the book, the research was also by doing. We've actually touched on that in the past. So, Mical have gone through the process of raising cotton as a kid and was familiar with it. And we also repeated a lot of the process. We just did the book, or mainly she and the girls did the book, and that was the research.
Right.
That was the big part of the research. So,
right.
So there is relatively on this processes of cottons and silk and upcycling and recycling, there was not so much academic research, but a lot of actually just doing it.
Yeah, hands-on.
Hands-on.
Tell us about that part you were talking about earlier, Assaf, about putting that computation to the number of, when you were trying to create, or when the kids wanted to use silk and then they needed to make sure they have enough. So that involved some computation, right? So tell us how you were able to come up with that.
Well, Mical is going to show us an illustration. So that don't cover me entirely. So we, in our experience, this is just a sticky note that's roughly the size of the hat that they were able to make with that amount of material. So we use that to lay over, the rest of the clothing and go, well, if that sticky note fits 4 times into a coat, we can calculate how much material we need for the coat.
Let me just stop
Right.
there, because this chapter started when I kind of wanted to explain to kids out there that it takes a lot of worms to make a garment. Like, how many worms does it take to make a garment? And I say a lot. So, and I said, oh, we'll need 1,000 in a forest of mulberry. And Assaf said, we need to say how much do we actually need? So I had to go back. He made me go back and do all those calculations. And he's very good at math. And so he wrote that chapter from beginning to end. And then I had to go back and make some more illustrations. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So that's how you were able to come up with that. So you felt that it was really important to really be, or at least put some numbers, specific numbers into it. And you had to really think about those. It's not just random numbers that you just got from.
No, it's not.
Right. But I learned something because I was just, okay, we put the templates, we'll multiply. And then Mical said, well, actually the hat is double-sided. And actually you need to think about the seam, right?
Seam allowance.
The seam allowance and yeah, so suddenly, again, by doing and by encountering the issue, and if you do it in real time, you may actually make a mistake, an error, because you didn't take the seam allowance, and then you learn from it, and then you do it again. So, trial and error is also a totally valid, way of learning things. So
that's the way of learning.
I love that part of
learning
the book.
things. But, so a lot of other problems came up once you start solving the big problem. There's sub problems that come up that you have to solve as you go.
I don't like to talk, and definitely not to publish something that I don't know. So it was very important for me that everything in the book is accurate. The cycle of cotton growing, how long it takes to mature, all those things, how to make a scarf, how to spin the yarn. We chose, for example, not to spin the silk because it was too difficult, honestly. But we found out that there's a real beauty in just stretching it and knitting it unspun. And I wish that you could feel how soft and beautiful this is. So,
and there's also an organic feel to it, what I see on this side. Not the yarn is, has variation. The yarn has variation of thickness, which actually creates a really nice texture.
Yeah. So
you discover as you go as well.
And so everything in the book is true. It's a true story that happened in different time and different section, but it all is true. And the clothes that we ended up designing for them is also all made out of our old clothes and old denim and old ties, which I think are very elegant.
And sewn by the girls, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit help from them, but our girls are actually rather self-sufficient. They can sew, they can cook, they can knit, and I'm very proud of them for that. And they love it. They love the fact that they are self-sufficient.
Okay, so Mical, you talked about the illustrations in the book, and I noticed that you would talk about coming up with the text first and then making the illustrations. Is that how the process went, or how did you go about with creating the illustrations? Which would come first? Is it the text or vice versa? It's
both. Some of the illustration I just really wanted to do because I have good memories of certain things. Like one of the very first illustration where I introduced the girls, I used to love when they did their hair like that. And I always thought that was so cute. So I wanted to do it and I did it and then, just add it where it was needed. Other illustration I did specifically for the book, like how to make silk. This is our kitchen. This is how we boiled it. This is how we stretch it. This is how we roll it on a toilet paper, old roll, and this is where when we need it. So those are all things that we actually did, took pictures, and they were made for the book. And then, at one point, like one of the people who read the book and he's a writer and he had some very valid question. He said, I really miss the rabbit. Want to see more of the rabbit. So I went out there and I made 2 more illustrations of the rabbit because, I thought it was valid.
Yeah, and I think I did that, but then we wrote a couple more sentences or small paragraphs that involved the rabbit. I was just thinking it's time to introduce the rabbit. That's another character in the book, which is more of a comic relief, but the rabbit is real. We had that rabbit and we still have a rabbit.
We now have our rabbit Dot. That was our middle rabbit, Hazel. She was a very big California rabbit with red eyes. She was very funny and cute. So I did more rabbit illustration just because it was suggested by editors. So it was kind of organic. The whole book had an organic evolution from wanting to do it to actually doing it, to actually fact check, not so much academic, but fact check in the real world, which we did at every stage.
And I think that's what I was going to say earlier, and I forgot that the whole process of the book was very organic, like Mical stated. It's really the opposite of, we have a business plan and we're going to publish a book and we have all these steps that we're doing. It grew bottom up from having an assignment at school that Mical decided she doesn't want to write another serious article that nobody is going to read or it's going to be buried at the end of the semester, and to writing this thing about a synopsis of the story, and it's like, this is pretty good. Let's make it better, and then it grew to be, and then I think some of her teachers deserve credit because I think somebody told you this needs to be published.
Absolutely.
And then Mical said, oh yeah.
Yeah,
let's publish it. And it just organically.
Yeah, it comes as a surprise to me that even in the fashion world, there are still people that are not educated about what's really going on, how problematic that industry is. And I'm saying it with love, but
the book doesn't really go into the problems of the industry.
No,
not at all. It's something that us adults keep in the background. The book provides a path that combines sustainability, creativity, and a joyous process to handle fashion.
Absolutely. Therefore, we need another book.
Well, you were talking about how you wanted to concentrate on single cotton and make it a small thing, and I was somewhat humorously said, well, we kept some other processes for future.
For next.
Oh, okay. We'll look forward to that.
There you go.
All right. So before we talk about the next books that you're going to write, tell us about the feedback that you've been receiving about this book. And if you can share to us one feedback or a couple of feedback that had the most impact on you.
The thing that I was really happy to hear was one of our reviewer that on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, shout out, said after him and his daughter read that book, she said, you know what? I'm not going to buy another garment from the fast fashion industry. And again, I'm not going to name names, but she named a name and you can read it in Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But she made the connection. And I was so happy to know that a child actually made that connection. And maybe it wasn't immediate, maybe they had a conversation about it. I don't know, but definitely a conversation starter. And I do like that. I do like that people realize that that is in there. And that's the important message that I do want to convey. This is the reward for making this.
I can just imagine the book being read by a parent to a child. And after the story, they'd be talking about the lessons that they get from the book. And it's not just about, fashion itself. It talks about a lot of different things, like being more mindful of what you do and just being not wasteful. I think that's a very good lesson that we can get from the book. And that's what I love about it. It had the same impact on me. It made me realize that it's high time that we start looking into how we look at the fashion industry, not just that, but also how we basically how we consume all these things.
Right.
Is it necessary, or is it just something that you would like just for the heck of getting one, like that? So those are the realizations that I got. And I'm an adult, so imagine the impact it would have on the kids. And I think that's a very, very good lasting lesson that you guys were able to impart to the readers.
So now that's my favorite comment I got. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that as well. So now that you talked about the feedback and how nice it felt to finally be able to see and hear that the purpose of your book, the impact that you would like to make, finally was able to happen for some of your readers. Tell us about your advice that you can give to those who are just writing or starting to write the book.
So, I can only talk from my singular perspective here, but there's a great sense of empowerment to give yourself the time and to believe in the importance of the journey and to get it out there. It is a great feeling to hold it in your hand and say, hey, done. If I can say something slightly negative or cautionary about self-publishing books, is that there are many sharks out there. And when you want to go out there and do it the indie way, which a lot of us have to, because there's so many writers, like so many people write book and dream to publish it. And I decided that at my age, I don't want to sit there and wait another 10 years until I get discovered. I don't feel like I have the time. I think that the message is important enough. And I hope maybe this book would do the trick. I think that the people I ended up publishing the book with, which is Archway Publishing, is a decent and reputable company. But I think I want to tell people to slow down and read the contracts before they sign up, because there's a lot out there that's not kosher.
I think the other message to, especially first-time writers, to be authentic. Don't write a book because a marketing person tells you that this is what, there's an audience for this, or this is how you do it. Be authentic and you'll probably be more successful. We have had mock-ups for, the book covers and that looked very different.
Yeah, so the publisher, for better or worse, they try to put you into the box of what other people do. And one of my experiences, actually, I went to several local bookstores and libraries to introduce my book and say hello and see, maybe I can go and talk with kids or whatever. I realized that the other children books that were there were so different than mine by look only. And I was like, oh no, I did something wrong. And then I thought, oh yeah, I did something right. I listened to my authentic self and I'm proud of it. And whatever happened, happened. But I think that an editor and a publisher would try to regulate your language to put it in the world of things that already exist. And I think, to me, it was very important to keep my vision, my authentic self in the book. And if it doesn't look like everybody else, then it doesn't.
Well, then it's a good thing.
I think it's
right. Then it's
I believe
your own identity.
Yeah.
That's actually what
Mhm.
part of what the book talks about.
right.
Okay, so earlier you already started to talk about your plans, probably coming up with another book. Tell us more about your goals for your book.
So, this is my soapbox, and I'd like to book as many events. I like to have as many eyeballs, as many readers as I possibly can. I hope the books sell enough that if I don't get another publisher, I can afford to do another one, because it's not cheap to self-publish books, and it's not cheap to do marketing. Nothing about it come without putting an extreme amount of effort into it. So I am trying to do as much publicity, and I hoping to be going to book fairs, and whatever
Get the
can
message out in any way we can.
get the message
Effective
out.
way that we can.
Right. And continue to do that. I am almost at the age of retirement, so it affords me a little bit more time and flexibility to go and do that. And I feel like I have a mission, and it had become clear with the publication of this book. And I just want to keep on doing it, and that's my way of doing my one thing to contribute it to a better world.
That's beautiful. Will there be a sequel, perhaps, related to Maya and Rumi's adventure in this book?
Yes, so I think that you've seen at the very end of the book, there's a couple of illustrations of Maya and Rumi now at 17, wearing clothes that I designed, and those are all made out of recycled material. So those were all like discarded stuff. Some of them I even find in the trash. I have stuff that I pick up when I walk around San Francisco and, throw it in the street. And I have stuff that nowadays people know me and they give me their old things. This is that collection. Part of that collection is going to be the collection, my runway show when I graduate. So I want to teach some about that. I also think that maybe I can do a book that would have more of instruction pattern, things that you can actually do yourself as a child. So I'm hoping to maybe have some more of my and Rumi adventures, in the sense of here's how you do it, and teach kids. But I'm also thinking I want adults to see it as well, because I think that even though adults are less likely to change, I would like adults to see my line of clothing and how beautiful and creative it is. And to understand that there is beauty in stuff that's not so shiny and new and just made yesterday. There's a beautiful history in stuff that's already here. I think there's a beauty in the cloth and the material, and knowing where it came from.
And knowing that it was made with love.
With
Right.
love and respect. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
So, Mical and Assaf, what would you want readers to learn from your twins' journey in this book?
Just wanted to give, one example of a fun, creative way to do something that is you, that you, the child, can find joy in at the same time is sustainable for the world.
as Maya and Rumi are now teenager, I think that we see a lot how teenagers try to distinguish themselves and find a way in the world. And I think a lot of it is through clothing. And I think that empowering them to have a critical eye, know where they get the stuff, know that it's sustainable, knowing how to get a garment from the thrift store and make it your own.
And to develop a voice
and
of their own.
To develop a voice might be a good book to do. You know, how do you do that? How do you find your way in the world through sustainable and ethical practices? And I hope that this tale of Maya and Rumi would inspire creativity and would create a stronger commitment to a sustainable future.
That's a powerful message. Tell us how your readers can get in touch with you. If they would like to give you feedback, perhaps, or talk to you about your book.
So first of all, you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Also, to you who love fashion and listener of the Dress, the History of Fashion, that book is also available on their store online. I also found it on eBay, and just Google Miri and Jade's new clothes and you will find it. I do have Miri and Jade new clothes Facebook page, and you can message me through there on Messenger. The same with Instagram. You can go and find Miri and Jade's new clothes on Instagram. The website is Miri and Jade New Clothes .com, yes. And there will be announcements there when we go to different cities and do book tours, and hopefully we'll have a lot of engagements and that good stuff. So, but if you also want to talk with me directly or have me reading in your library, those are the ways to find me. And I'll be delighted.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mical and Assaf, for joining us today and sharing the wonderful story behind Miri and Jade's new clothes. So it's been an absolute pleasure hearing about how creativity, sustainability, and of course, family can come together in this heartwarming book. So for those of you watching and listening, don't miss out on this beautiful story. You can find Miri and Jade's New Clothes by Mical Rezoni with Assaf Rezoni on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Archway Publishing online bookstore, and various online platforms, of course, in softcover, hardcover, and ebook formats. Thanks again to both of you for joining us today, Mical and Assaf. To everyone tuned in, we hope this episode has given you a fresh perspective and inspired your own creative projects. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Author Roundup. See you next time.